So I'm happy now, Pascal, to ask you first question. You left China as a correspondent for SRF in 2019. What were your feelings upon returning to Switzerland in 2019? With what feelings did you leave China? What was the mood in China the moment that you left, especially with regard to your work there?
I think the mood at that moment, uh, as a journalist, was getting more and more difficult for myself. I felt in a situation where I arrived to a country in 2013, and I left the country which was completely different. Things have had changed over time a lot, especially because of since Xi Jinping took over just the very moment I arrived. And when I left the country, I left this country also with how to say, with very strange kind of feelings. I was not happy when I left. I felt like there were so many stories that couldn't be told anymore the way they should be told, and I had to kind of leave the country also in a way which did not really make myself really comfortable.
How were immediately before leaving, or the year that you left, 2019, like the working conditions, getting interview partners, talking, being able to travel around the country, do like interviews in the street with ordinary people? Was all this still possible, or had that changed already?
Now, this is actually one of the key points, which made me also, in a way, feeling less and less comfortable doing my job there, because a lot of things were not possible anymore in a way we actually, as journalists, would like to do our reportings. Exactly this, that we can go in the streets and do normal interviews with random people in the street was becoming more and more difficult, especially as a TV journalist, where you always need the picture. You need to go out with a camera. People have to talk to you, showing their face, and this has dramatically changed over the years. If I was comparing this to my colleagues, for example, who were working there for the radio or for print, they had it still much easier at that time. But there were many examples of people who talked to us 5 years ago, and then suddenly they stopped talking to us. In the beginning, they probably would have said, okay, you cannot come to the university anymore if it was a professor or a scholar. I can meet you somewhere in a cafe or at your office. So this was usually the first step, and then the last step was they just didn't talk at all.
This makes things difficult. One thing that always surprised me and struck me when I worked there as a correspondent, when I was asked by, like, so to say, outsiders, like Europeans, people in my home country, how it is to work there in China. They always ask me very naively, "Oh, do you have to do you have to give your pieces that you write to the foreign ministry first in Beijing, and they will check it, and then you are able to file it?" I said, "Of course it's not like this. Of course it's not like. I mean, we do our stories,
Yeah.
file our stories, and they are published. And but there is a certain degree of, like, surveillance, or a way they have that they can check what we're doing, right?"
Of course, I mean this is part of the game. Yes, this is the self censorship that is taking place, and of course we always try to keep it as low as possible. This self censorship, but it's a matter of fact that if you talk to people and you bring people in danger, and you don't want to do that as a journalist as well, and this is something that the counterpart on the other side knows very well, that we are struggling also with this, and this is exactly where censorship starts. Meaning, for example, I can give you an example. It happened to me a couple of times that people really disappeared after I interviewed them, and this is something you don't get over very easily. And of course, it is not like this that we have to show our reports before we air them. But of course, there is somebody keeping an eye on that. This is the embassy in Switzerland. They know what we are doing, and if we do something that they dislike, I might get an invitation in Shanghai from the person who is responsible for my visa, and that's exactly where they have us on the hook. I mean, it did happen not only once that we have to go for to drink tea, as it is called in Chinese, and that means like you will meet the person who is responsible for my case, and you will have a nice talk. Usually it's a nice talk, but it's a nice way to say we are watching you, we know what you're doing, and that's something you have to start to get used to without becoming paranoid.
Mm. What I heard from colleagues who work over there for European media, um, they tell me now that all their stories, I'm talking about print journalism now, all their stories they write are being checked by the embassies in Europe. Let it be Switzerland, let it be Germany, let it be France. The embassy will collect all the pieces, and I have at least one example where the colleague in Beijing got a call from the embassy in Berlin, and they went through her story like word by word and told her, "You're not supposed to write this, you're not supposed to write that." And this, I think, illustrates how difficult the working conditions have become. But let me come back to, I mean, I'm a bit reluctant to use that word, but you had the privilege to work there when Xi Jinping was in power already. I left China as a correspondent when he was just about to take over power. So I left in early 2012. And when I arrived in late 2006, actually, it opened up for us. They released travel restrictions. We could go, except for Tibet, wherever we wanted. Um, we I interviewed during my 5 years in China, I interviewed two ministers. We would get access like background talks, the Ministry of Labor. We could interview, of course, academics, professors. It was relatively easy, except for when we reported on the spot on critical issues. Like I remember one story, there was a strike in a Guangdong factory, and there was like state security with their video cameras, and also Xinjiang, Kashgar, we were followed and kicked out of the city. But apart from that, it had opened up also with regard in the perspective that the 2008 Olympics were coming up. And so what would you say might, do you see any chance or perspective where it might reverse again towards like more relaxed?
No, that's a very interesting point you're making here. I observe the exact opposite, and this has to do with the role of China that China has now in the world. We are facing a next Olympic in China in just 1 year from now. The 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 guidelines at the moment are completely different from what they were in 2008. This was the moment when China opened up. This was kind of the deal they made with the outside world. It was like, we are opening up for journalists because we are hosting these games, and we want to show the world that we are capable of also being a free country now. I mean, that's what they wanted. That was what they wanted to show us at that time. It started immediately changing once Xi Jinping took power. In 2013, when I arrived, I was still also believing that the opening up goes on. But this changed very, very quickly. In the first year I was there was the 25 years anniversary of Tiananmen. This was the moment when Google was blocked. This was the moment when the internet censorship really started kicking in that we are facing now. And I think what we are seeing now ahead of these next Olympics is China not not be letting itself being bullied from the outside anymore by things like that. And I don't see any signs that there will be an opening. It's rather the opposite. Look at what's happening now since during the COVID crisis, the last year, many foreign journalists like you as well, me too, who were even already, some of them already possess a journalist visa for China, but they are stuck outside of China now for almost 1 year, and this is not a coincidence. China is taking advantage at the moment out of this. I would say that there's probably never been a smaller number of foreign journalists within China for the last 15 years as for now. And that's exactly what they are looking for, and we are we are again just ahead of an Olympic game which should be taking place, and I think the, it has completely changed from what you were facing at that time.
I know that from talking to people, and like it is difficult now getting a journalist visa for China. That is right, and very often they mention the COVID crisis as a reason. Yeah, yeah. But one other issue I want to raise with you, Pascal, is when I worked there, we always like we were faced with like accusations, like on the one hand from the foreign European business community, and at the same time from Chinese authorities, where they go like the way like, oh, you Western media, you always report negative about China, and then they would show us like polls where they have 100 people and 80% would say like it's all negative reporting, Western media. And I always thought, do they have a point? Is that true? And then I try to compare with like American media, like New York Times and the French, Le Monde and Le Figaro, and how they report. And I never could really find the point that we, like Swiss or German, that we are too critical, that we were doing China bashing. And I don't know how you see it.
No, we have been talking about that many times at our office as well. I used to work in a shared office. There were journalists from the Figaro, from Stern magazine from Germany, from the Swiss radio, the Swiss French-speaking radio. There was a bunch of journalists. It was also changing, and this was one of the topics we have always been talking about. Like, and of course, there was these questions. There were these questions from the Swiss business community, saying like you are always reporting negatively about China and so on. And probably yes, we were critical, but they were probably just a bit less critical in their from their backgrounds. But this is a very interesting point that you're mentioning here, because I see a change happening here at the moment, where I see, for example, take the Liberal Party in Switzerland, which now almost officially talks about a much more takes a much more critical stand towards China than the same people did like 3 years ago. And so I think, yes, I don't think we were wrong, but I think it's now the narrative is changing at the moment a bit.
I agree with you. I perfectly agree. I mean, during my years in China between 2012 and 2006 and 2012, I always told people in Europe when I came back and when I gave talks and I'm meeting, I said, look at China, what's happening there economically, politically, where they're going in terms of like technological development. And my feeling always was the only interest my counterparts here in Europe had in China was like, it's a big market, we make money there, and that's it. Nobody really tried to dig deeper and understand what was going on, the Hu Jintao Wen Jiabao era, why did Xi Jinping come into power? They never made the effort of really digging deep and try to follow and understand developments. And I mean, I always say, like, read the Chinese documents. It's not all propaganda. There you see where the country.
Yes. Yeah.
Suddenly, like 2-3 years ago, when all these takeovers happened in Europe, when ChemChina bought up Syngenta and KUKA in Germany was bought by a Chinese company, by Meidi, and suddenly they woke up and said, oh, there's the gorilla in the ring. China is there, and they are strong. And they are making their point, and they are claiming their role on the world stage. And suddenly everybody says, China, China, China. and it seems like they don't really have a strategy. I don't know how you see it. Like I think Switzerland will come up now with this China strategy paper. That is a correct strategy toward China. I'm not sure.
Yes, of course. I mean, that's the next. I think what we are seeing now is really exactly what you describe as an awakening, and I think uh, there's something happening which should have actually happened years ago already, and this China strategy that is now being discussed. Let's see what it will be like, but it seems to me that still it's not very substantial, and there's that's exactly this what's happening now is what I think as a journalist being there, we we saw that coming like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and but nobody was believing that yet or wanted to believe it at that time as well. And I mean, then there is another thing. I mean, if it, I feel bad to be pushed in that corner of like just being the always critical negative journalist, because another important point which I want to make here is if you are there as a correspondent, you're not only reporting about the Communist Party, you're also reporting about the people, and and that's something which often gets forgotten. Also at home at the head offices of our media outlets. Um, yeah, there is. If we say China, we most of the time we always think of the Communist Party of the regime in Beijing, and that the whole diversity often gets forgotten, and that's what for me. To come back to the beginning, what we were talking about, like after I left as a correspondent, I had the chance to go back again for to do a documentary in which I was trying to focus for once on the humans, on the human touch of China, and I found again this China which I was actually looking for, which I was dreaming of when I took over the post as a correspondent. The China that I knew from traveling, that the China that I knew as a backpacker back in the early 2000s, and this is something which tends to get to be forgotten if you're only doing the political stories and the daily work as a journalist, and I think there's a certain danger that this will actually becoming worse in the future, I think, because the more you're pushed into this defense role as a journalist, the more actually you forget to do the other stories as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, first of all, I find China is one of the most difficult and complicated countries to report from. Access to information in general is difficult, it's hard to come by. And then, yeah, I agree with that. Like, very often you reporting on political issues about what the party is doing, and then these difficult issues like Xinjiang and Tibet. But what I discovered when I was there, I worked for an economic magazine, and I did stories, as you just said, about people. So then I give you one example. I wanted to do a story about industrial design in Chinese companies, and I started to investigate and research, and I found amazing people, creative, dynamic. It was just great. Where I thought, my God, if you let these people run and give them some freedom, like the West is really in a critical position because they are so good. They are so good. And these were the nice stories then that very often just get forgotten, or you don't have time to do them. And yeah, yeah. But now, do you think, I mean, this is, we always discuss this here also in our editorial board, like with China's image now under Xi Jinping and their assertive approach towards Europe and towards the US. The image, of course, we agree on that, I think, has changed over the past few years. How do we deal with this? Do we engage them? Do we have to engage them where it's possible to engage them? Like always mentioned is climate change, and do we here in Europe also need to be more assertive and more aggressive? I don't know. How do you? Is a very in my view is a very difficult line to walk.
It's a very thin line to walk
It
on. I
was
mean,
only one.
I think there is, and I think there is also not one clear answer to that.
We had this discussion here very early already before the last presidential elections in the US, and where our colleague in Beijing made the point, the Communist Party and the Chinese government, they are hoping for a re-election of Donald Trump. And the first moment I heard that, I was surprised. I thought, wow, okay. And then I just read a piece in Foreign Affairs the other day where Kevin Rudd made the same point. They would have been happy with another term of Donald Trump. What do you think about that?
I think that I mean there was a lot of discussion about this point, and I think there are a lot of valuable points to make that they were happy to have Donald Trump there, because of course for I think internally for their internal politics it was brilliant to have a Donald Trump who shows how democracy is becoming obsolete, and how democracy is really being driven against the wall, and how they have a solution which probably solves today's problems better, in their opinion, than democracy does. Take again the virus as an example. At least it's the narrative that they could take and say, like, look, one of the biggest democracies is just messing it up with an elected president, and this is what happens. And I think this is one point which is fair to mention. I think it helped them internally for internal politics. But if you look at the real facts and figures, I don't think that on a longer term a second Trump term would have really helped them. I mean, what the Communist Party fears the most is things that are not plannable, things that are difficult to calculate. And there was nothing more difficult to calculate than a President Trump. I think this is becoming better with a government under with any almost any other kind of president than Trump. And I think that must be, in my opinion, that must be also a bit an important point that you have to take into consideration as a government in China. I think things become more plannable again now.